Okay, I have just switched over onto my MacBook Air. It's the M3, it's the one that cost £1,000. It was the lowest spec ever. And I've just switched over to my Nuke Indie license in Nuke. Now in terms of gizmos and stuff, I have the Nuke toolkit installed. I don't believe I'm using, because I only recently installed this, so I've not actually used any gizmos in this comp at the moment, but I am using stuff that I've done. I've downloaded from Nukepedia and dropped them in here. So you may need to just have a look at this list and match those in Nukepedia, and I'll try and provide a list at the end of the video or in the project file. So I've got this comp, and this comp is saved into the usual place that I mentioned before in the DCC under Assets Nuke, and it's just a global project file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my renders from my external hard drive on this machine, which is synced to a G drive, which is where my PC is also saving to. So the renders are all going to one place, and they're being pulled down into a external drive on this machine and just brought in here like that. So I can actually just jump over while my machine is slowly cooking away over there. I can just comp on here without frying myself in this heat on this sunny day. So I've got this little input here, and I'll explain it. You might see this modular OS, modular projects, modular input, and then these brackets and value control asset name, value control geovar, value control material var, value control HDRI, and then finally the path. So this is just a bit like we do with Houdini, where we concatenate variables together. I'm doing the same in Nuke here. So this is basically an automated place to load all of my renders when they come in. So first thing I do is I press S and I would set my project root. Now normally I have this set to the correct frame range. It's 24 because that's what we rendered in, but usually when I'm shooting on my iPhone and Apple Pro Res it's 25. So but for now we're going to set it 24, and it's going to be HD resolution, and frame range is just the rendered frame range we did in Houdini. So that's the global project settings. I've also created variables called OS, which points to my external hard drive, which is pointing to my G drive, external hard drive, kind of from this machine. So if I switch to my PC, I can predefine that on my PC as well, and I can jump back and forth like that. Now you can set this up to do this automatically as well with variables and things, but this was just a quicker way that I just didn't have to use my brain too much. So in terms of input, I'm basically doing a little shortcut here, ren assets Houdini, and then output is ren asset nuke, and then the project is called monsters. So we're going to use all these to kind of put them inside of this. So that's going to go and fetch those renders. So if you look inside here, you'll get, well, it doesn't resolve to it, which is strange, but it loads in the actual beauty render. You can see that it is actually working because you can see this here. And I'm doing the same over here. So this is the network that we have down here, and it's quite overkill, but I'll go through every bit of it and just show you what the plan was. It's overkill, but it's because I can drop this down as a template and strip out what I don't need. And this is a look dev comp that I use just to kind of get a first glimpse of everything without doing any heavy comp work. I usually reserve that for when I'm integrating this into the actual backplay or live action or the footage that you filmed on your camera. So on this side, this needs updating actually, so I might need to quickly update this to quickly grab maybe just these guys. I'm always changing stuff. I should really stop. Whoops. I probably could do with a... There we go. So this is all working now. It's going to take a few moments to kind of stop erroring. There we go. So you've got the HDRI on one side, and this has been it's going to dynamically change. You may have noticed, even though we're bringing this in automatically here, and if you notice, this is the project, which is the monsters ingest HDR 2K. I've not changed the 2K as a slider or anything because I've only got 2K at the moment on this project, so this is something I could change. But this value control is going to take, and you can see these green lines here. Well, this here is just me basically copying this path into like a sticky note so I can remember what this actually is. If I delete this, I've got a copy of it here, but because it's actually inside of an expression, these green lines will show you and point down. I'm sure you can mute these or turn them off, but it'll point down to the culprit that's kind of holding those expressions. So this is a I can't remember what they call them. Is it user? There's a node, a no op. I can't quite remember what they're called. No op. A no op. It's like a null. And you can go into these things and you can basically double click on it and you can manage user knobs and you can start adding stuff, very much like the digital assets in Houdini. So what I did is I went in here and I added some user knobs, and I've added the asset name, the geo variant HDI map. So these are strings. So if you edit these, you'll see the asset name, and you can see I've just put monster because that's the name of the asset. So that's something I can change. And then I've got the geo variant. So I've gone in and predefined a couple of variants. If you remember, we've added a couple of variants. I could quickly update this based on what I'm rendering, and it's all very live, so it's quite nice. I've got material variant, so I guess you're going to understand it's going to be like this. And then I've got the HDRIs where I've just predefined the names of the HDRI maps, not the extensions, just the names of the maps. And then what else have we got? You've got the output path, which might need some. Yes, so that's the ren output. We might need to update some of these. So what that's going to do is this controller here is going to allow me to view at the very end of my comp here, like so. And oh, by the way, this section on the right here, we're bringing in a grey background. I'm adding a subtle bit of grain because sometimes when this gets compressed you get banding, and I hate it, the kind of social media banding on YouTube and all that. So I just added a little bit of grain. You can't really see it unless I zoom right in, but that does remove a bit of banding for me. Then I'm just adding this vignette to kind of give something interesting, and that's it. This goes into a switch node and I can switch between a grey background or the backplate. So the backplate is this HDRI map, and then I'm doing a spherical transform. So the spherical transform is a really nice node. You should look at it, and it's a good way of kind of distorting certain images certain ways. So for example, when I shot the HDRI on a 360-degree camera, you get like a fisheye 2 image, 180-degree image. So it looks very circular from 180 degrees from the front and from the back. And then when you've created HDRIs from that, you get the latitude longitude map, and then you can set this to rectangular, and then I just reformat it so it looks a bit like a photograph shot on my camera, but really it's not. It's just a 360-degree image that's been kind of distorted and reformatted that way. I'm not using the denoiser at the moment, so we can kind of ignore that. So this is the switch node, so I can choose how I want to see my 3D render composited over this background, like so. And I will show you a trick to switch between these with Python on the export filter later on the right nodes. So this is just a quick temporary thing. The other thing I'm doing with the spherical transform is I've put in a expression, and I'm still working on this. I just did it a minute ago. I'm setting a expression to, if you remember our light rigs in Houdini would stay stationary for a certain amount of frames and then they would rotate. Well, I kind of replicated that behavior. So it's a bit custom, but I'll just zoom in. There we go. So this is kind of the expression that it's doing a 360. So the thing that might be wrong is the initial orientation. So if we look at the background here and then we composite this against the chrome balls, you might find it's not in the right orientation. So I might need to nudge that around a little bit by offsetting this expression at some point. But it's just something I quickly put in, and I might as well show that to you. So the next thing we do is we pull in some stuff from the left hand side, which is the render. So that goes into reformat node. Now we are rendering at HD, and sometimes I don't render at HD. So my project is set to HD and I force it to HD sometimes, or I force the entire project to a lower res because I might be testing this out. And that's the reformat. And then we branch off here and I start pulling out those holdout mats here, the shadows, the occlusion, the diffuse, which you don't really see. I need to figure out what that is, but it's not present at the moment. And then the holdout reflections, you can see them, they're in there. You could always crank up the exposure to see that. Oops, we need actually some exposure. There we go. And then based on the sidefx documentation, what you're supposed to do, if I've got this right, is take the holdout shadows and the holdout reflections and then just plus them together, invert them, and then multiply that in. So you get this on the grey background. And then you do the same, you get the holdout diffuse and the holdout reflections, and you plus those together along with the holdout emission. So if you had a spaceship with glowy bits, this would be the holdout emission pass, but I don't, so it's disabled and it's just copied over the holdout reflections, which is this one. So it's not actually doing anything. So essentially what you have is you have the kind of occlusion and shadows and then some reflections that you can dial in, whatever. So because it's a look dev scene, I'm not particularly precious over this at the moment. It's just proving that these AOVs may be coming in and maybe something's missing, and I can kind of quickly adjust it based on this quick analysis here. So the switch node, again, you can see it's dropping in the shadowy thing here. Very quick comp. It's not technically a professional comp or anything. By the way, I'm not a comp artist. I haven't used Nuke for over 10 years, if not longer. So the other day I jumped back in and I've been using I used Natron a while, which was like a kind of a fake Nuke for free, but it got quite slow, and I comped most of my projects for a year in that. And then I moved over to Fusion because DaVinci Resolve was on the scene, and I was using the standalone Fusion because it's way easier to use than the one inside of Resolve. But I now use both, so now I use Nuke and Fusion or whatever. So so this is the background here that we're going to lay our CG on. So moving back to our CG, I just pull out the PMAT, it doesn't do anything, and I just check the crypto mat. So these are just like AOVs just pulled out. So I've got this expression here called value in one, and that's allowing the shuffle node to label everything like Facian ratio. And I'm just breaking out all of these. These can sometimes get deleted and stripped back based on each project. And then they're not actually being used, they're just being pulled out to one side so I can see them. So in comes the render, and then I do what you call rebuilding the beauty. So what I would do, you can ignore all of this. This is going to expand onto a more shot-based thing later on. But what I'm going to do is unpre-multiply all of my channels and then split out every AOV that I've rendered. So I know I've got a diffuse and an indirect diffuse, a subsurface scattering, a glossy reflections, glossy transmission, which I don't think actually anything is being used in that, and a combined emission, and that's not being used. And they're going to grade nodes and color correct nodes. They're all set to defaults, they're not doing anything. And then I rebuild, so I start plussing everything back on, like so. And then I can just disable the ones that are not needed. So you essentially have the in and the out, and we can adjust the blacks here based on your backplate if you want, but I'm just going to leave it for now. And then there's no alpha, so I'm going to copy the alpha back in like so, and then I'm going to pre-multiply this back so we have the original thing. So that's just to test, you know, from a look dev point of view, that if I send this to lighting or whatever, I know exactly what I'm needing. I can kind of predefine that up front sometimes. And I can also do a little bit of look dev in here if I really want, but I tend not to touch this unless I'm doing a nuke file session for one particular monster. I will save this session out, but this is going to be a thing that renders dynamically change and pass through, and the background will dynamically change and pass through based on the geometry variant, material variant, and the HDRI. So we're going to get turntable renders of everything from this one file. But as you could imagine, you could save this out as a unique file and do some kind of creative nuke comp work in here. So you could, for example, decide you don't like the subsurface as much and stuff like that, or you could color correct or hue shift and, you know, just bring things in however you like. That was amazing comp work right there. So that's pretty much all that's going off here. I'm not doing anything with film grain. I've just stuck a little bit of grain on the CD render, but nothing much. And then I bring in a light wrap node, and it's just pulling in the results of whatever is happening up here. So usually the light wrap isn't very interesting when it's on a grey background, but occasionally some of these HDRIs have a lot of intensity, and I thought it'd look kind of pretty if I had a little bit of light wrap coming in. But again, whatever you decide on these, just half it afterwards, because I found it gets too much. And then I put on like a little glow. So I take a Luma key. So if you look at the alpha, it's very extreme. Can pre-multiply and add a glow. So you can look at this glow here, and I can just add a gentle glow on there. And that's minus operation to kind of give this result. And I can plus that back on. And then if you want, then when you press 1 to view here, you can dial this in and out, and just, you know, it's up to you. It's like cooking, it's down to your taste. But usually if you're matching backplate, there'll be something there. I'm not sharpening this anymore. And then I'm just going to add the CG onto the background, so you've got a little bit of a shadow here, and that's it. And then occasionally I'll do some flares and some chromatic aberration a little bit on the edges. Nothing too much to change the look dev, but this is kind of like the render slapped on the background and done. And then I'll just dynamically add the text. I might change the font, but I don't want it to be, I just want it to be there so I can glance at it. And the way I've done this, if you select this, you'll see a hidden line, and in here it's got the expression called metadata exr/comment, and this is going back to something in the metadata we did in Houdini, and the actual node is set to, is it hide somewhere? Hide here, hide input. So if I let go, it hides the input, and that's used elsewhere as well. It's actually used in here. It's like, it's kind of linked in here later on. So I take that text and I invert it, and I add that to an ambient occlusion pass, which is again extracted from the beauty, which we'll talk about. So the text metadata, it goes, if I click on him, it goes right up here, and I just branch off here and I put a shuffle doing nothing. And the reason for that is I want to kind of grab this metadata, just that's all I want. I don't want any alpha, any image in here. And that's essentially what the text node is grabbing, just to label. Let's have a look. Just to label that, and then I can composite that over. And then a final reformat, which isn't doing anything. Then I might add 2 splits here. I'll do a HDRI movie, then I'll do a grey dot movie with some grain on it. And that's basically it. Whoops, that's the end of the line. I might just have a bunch of MOV files with the grey version and the HDRI version. And what I mean by that is it's switching back up to this, so it's kind of switching to the grey version, even though it's the same, like, it's the same render and the same light reference. I'm just switching between, so it's not doing a great deal. It's just something nice to look at, I guess. And I take this value here and the name of this, and I use that in both of these, a Python expression to switch this value to 0 for the movie, so that will be the HDRI, and then here it'll switch it to 1, and when this renders out to disk, it will be grey. And then on the left hand side, I'm exporting a sequence of EXRs, and these are what I sometimes send into DaVinci Resolve. So it's the same formula. You've got the EXR HDRI version, and then you'll have the EXR grey version switched by a Python expression. And the EXRs, I might put these into DaVinci Resolve, but I tend to do that every now and again just for presentations or something like that. We'll talk about the export location in just a second, because I think I have to update something very quickly in the right nodes. It might not go to the right place. I'll just double check. The ambient occlusion pass you saw was basically a last minute thing where I brought in the original render. So this is a postage stamp. Now postage stamps are a bit like a Houdini object merge. You drop down a postage stamp and then you link, in fact I'll show you, let me come up here. You drop down a postage stamp and it's got nothing in it until you click on it, and then it just copies it over like that, and then you have this node following you around forever like this line following you saying, don't forget where I come from, here I am. And that's a bit annoying. So you can hide the input and then you've got like a direct link to some other part of your comp. I'm sure there are other ways like pre-comps and stuff, but that's what this is. So I'm going to delete that. And then what do? I shuffle out the let's have a look, into the ambient occlusion, but I make sure I've got the original alpha here like so. And then I take a crypto mat. So if I pick preview the mats, I've made a new mat like so, and then I'm making another crypto mat, and I'm taking these guys out of the render by inverting the crypto mat. So now the alpha has been inverted. So before, if I'm looking at the alpha, and now it's inverted, press A, and then I will do an over and just merge this over this. And this is merging over a white background, bit of grain, a bit of a fancy vignette, if I say fancy, and it merges over. And then sometimes I might add a little bit of a sharpen in there just to kind of ping that out, and that's kind of like a quick and cheap bit of chromatic. Why not? That's not being used anymore. And then I'll merge over an inverted, and I might change this, an inverted bit of text, which is the text node, just so I have a quick copy of that dynamically changing as well. So what will happen now is the controller here that we set up, I can look at the A when it's rendered. If it has rendered, I can make sure I'm looking at the right. So I can look at the version A of this monster and B. And my machine's rendering these, so I know it's got a few left to render. So I can quickly go through. Now I don't have any material variants at this stage, and I only have material variants A and B on disk. This is basically concatenating a file path that is driving the input of both my node up here. Now it will error until I kind of view it back again. It can sometimes take a bit of kicking around this, and it will input the HDRI map dynamically as well. So I would then switch and just render each one out of one comp. It's nothing too fancy, it's just a nice way. And I usually just do the dot movies for the MP4s or whatever you want to do here, like so. So I'll not talk about the output path. I'll do that separate because I'm going to quickly fix something up and re-record that part. So I think that's pretty much everything. So the light maps, for example, if I've got every render for geometry variant B and the material variants, I should be able to switch between. Let me view the final comp, which is down here. I should be able to switch between all the light rigs and quickly know what they're called down here, and just have a quick, is that still rendering? you know, there it is, some HDRI Haven maps. If you can see this red dot, oh, it's the camera. I thought it was the nuke dot. It's okay. Nuke dot meaning when you hit control, you can like sample the image like that, and it can be a bit annoying. So I think you can shift and is it command and or control and right click command on the Mac. Don't know what that would be on the PC. My mind's gone blank. It's command. It'll be alt probably or something. Yeah, so you can quickly view these rigs in different environments, and then what will happen is because the Houdini render, he spins round like so, and then he gets halfway through and he freezes. The environment map spins. You see the environment render? But I'm also spinning the environment map in Nuke as well, because I chose not to render the environment map into the render or anything like that. So I'm using Nuke because I feel a little bit more confident with it than Copernicus, but there's nothing to stop you from automating all of this in Copernicus and just having a contact sheet come out as well. But automation is fantastic, but depending on how far and how long you want to spend automating things, as opposed to just predefining a quick template that you can drop down, buff, and this is what comes out the box now. So all I have to do is every Nuke session is press S and just update maybe the the monster project. That's it. And then if I've changed any HDRIs, I would essentially match whatever I've done on disk in here. So I would kind of come in here and go manage user knobs, and I would quickly just grab the HDRI list and make sure I've got the right names. So it just gets you somewhere quickly for free. You've done all the hard work, you know, this might have taken a few hours to kind of figure out what to do, and no doubt it'll change, but that's the nice thing about templates. You can just grab the whole lot and then go file, create a new template, stick it in wherever you like. So I would have it here, and this would be like CGI inputs. And if it already exists, it'll say, hey, you already exist, and I'm saving this into my toolsets folder, which is also symlinked to my Google Drive, so my PC can actually read these toolsets as well. So I don't like kind of have two lots of individual things. It's one location. Same for my repositories and gizmos. They're all linked to one place, and both machines can load them in. So that's a quick overview of the quick comp thing I would do. So the last thing I probably need to fix is the rotation or the orientation of the backplate on the start frame. So if you look at the HDRI, which you can see the CG Macbeth and Chrome Ball and the little fellow on the floor, but you could see the actual contribution of the HDRI reflecting in this Chrome Ball. It's probably, the background probably is in the wrong orientation, so I would just need to create an offset in the spherical transform somewhere. So I would just have to create an offset in the expression to match that. So maybe that light is actually behind the camera rather. So for now, I've just added this in. So just bear that in mind. I'm just throwing it out there because I might add that in. It's not very apparent here, but maybe it'd be more apparent when we look at it with some more information in the HDRI. So if I quickly move down to a HDRI, and let's see what's rendered. See if I've got the garden rendered for this guy. There he is. So if we were to look at the garden, we've got this, is it a yucca plant or something? And I've got my patio little thing here, back here. You would kind of zoom in and try to align that to look like it's reflecting in there. Again, I haven't done that. I hope that makes sense. I can't quite work out what I'm looking at here. That looks like the conifers on the right, and that's that. So you would have to rotate this around as a starting point, so that it just makes sense for like things like the light wrap and the HDRI responds correctly to what you're seeing. Otherwise, visually it'll feel wrong. But for now, that was my first take of just kind of having a quick network of automating this. So these green lines, as I mentioned before, they tell you when there's an expression being used somewhere. So the this guy it's got an expression. Basically, I don't need them. They're just a copy of what I put in here, just in case I change this file path. I'll break that expression, but I don't need that anymore, so I'm going to get rid of that. Same for the other one. It's not actually contributing to anything. So these two are now saying, yeah, there's some expressions being used in here. So I'm surprised there isn't any kind of line from here with the Python, choose background 01. But and what I mean by that is each one of these does have the Python in there, choose background 01. So I would have expected to see some kind of relationship there, but this must just be expressions. So you can see all of these lines are like dependency link expression lines, whatever you call them. And you can see I am basically creating this output path. So I'll come back and I'll fix the output paths and we'll talk about where things go when they render. But I'll probably just wait for my system to finish rendering on my PC first, otherwise certain frames may be missing and things like that. Alright, I'll see you in a bit. Okay, let's pick up where we left off. So we were about to export everything and I have this controller here and I've added a save to section here, and the nice thing about this is actually a direct. I can go in and choose where I want this to be, so I can save to the monsters ren asset nuke as a top level, and I can select that. So I'm not actually going to use this output section here. I'm going to remove it because I'm upgrading it because I don't like writing stuff in, so I like to just go and find on disk. I thought that was a better thing to do. And it looks like I've done the same with this asset name. I don't really need to create a file path, but you can actually just write it in. So I'm going to remove this one, manage user knobs, and get that output one, and then just delete it. Yes, hopefully nothing breaks. And we're done. So it's simple now. So I guess we could have done an input path as well. So like we did up the top here when we set this $OS project, we could probably do something similar and not use variables. Maybe I'm not doing that right because I didn't actually use the output of variable at all, so that can go. So I might revisit this when I learn a little bit more about Nuke's variables and shortcuts. We all know Houdini's $job and all the custom aliases you can create. I'm sure it works the same way, so I'll do a little bit of reading up on that. It turns out they're quite powerful for kind of streamlining these workflows. So nothing's changed at all in the inputs. They're still dynamically fed in and controlled by this. Look at this, this thing here. So what I've done is I've just stacked up a new path here. So this path is very large and it's going to do a movie file, and then it's going to do a movie file of the gray thing. So you've got the gray background and then you'll have the HDR version here. So the reason they are going to switch when we save these out is because the Python path is saying set this choose background which attribute, set it to 0, and this one's setting it to 1, which is referring back to this choose background and this which. So it's going to kind of go give me that or give me that for each render. So, and that just does it there. Now the only thing that is a little bit annoying that I haven't figured out, if I select them and I render selected or render all, it doesn't seem to run the Python script. So I end up with this image twice, even though it's going to be named like gray and HDRI. So what I'll do is I will let me bring up a directory as to where these are coming from. So the value control save path, it's basically bringing in, and let me bring this together to show you. This again is totally optional, so I'll set this to 2, and then hopefully we can click on this and we can have both of them kind of viewed. So we've got this value control save path, and that's that. This is the result of that. So that's the whole path there, and then it's going to be a asset name, which is going to be monster, which is that. So there's going to be a new folder called MOV, and then we're going to get the asset name, the geo, and the material variant, which is all of these. So whatever I've set here is just going to go into a folder, and then it's going to be this underscore HDRI, and it's going to be the same for this, and it's also going to be the same for the occlusion one as well. So if I go to my project structure, let me drag this in here, and this is getting a little bit crowded, so hopefully I can actually see what I'm doing here. But if I save out just the MOV files, I could kind of go in and select the correct global frame range, and I could maybe render that into the background, maybe see whether that happens to background here. Please check. Oh, I don't know what that is. So what, we'll not do the background render. I've never actually tried that before, so I'll have to figure out. Wait a sec. I don't know what that is. Continue on error, and it's going to create a monsters folder, and that's inside of the monsters project. Render assets and nuke, and there's the monster assets. So we've got a movie file being created like so. So it's a nice place to just get a dynamic dynamically named file on disk, but it's very manual. But it's like all I have to do now is say, okay, well, I've done the HDRI version of this particular monster, so there we go. So you've got the kind of the rough comp, and then we've got the gray version. So this is totally, by the way, totally optional, up to you really. I'm going to set this back to 1 so I don't get confused, and then I might just render that out as well, and you're going to get an accompanying path, all named the same, but it's going to be the gray. And I'm just going to dump as many movie files, and they're just in ProRes format because I'm on the Mac, so I might as well. I'll just show you the render settings for this. By the way, you can analyze this this nuke file. It's a nuke IND file. It'll be in the project structure as well, so you can go ahead and find it. So these and this occlusion section here, they all have the same output settings here, like so, and they all have the same output path apart from this underscore awk, which I think you can actually derive the name from elsewhere as well and go completely procedural. But I'm going to render that as well. So I've not changed anything in my input, but we should be getting a kind of a gray version and a HDR version. So all that's changed here is there's a gray background and there's a HDRI, and then there'll be an occlusion render as just an option, just a freebie that I threw in. So you could do whatever you like really. And then that's it. And if you want to do the EXRs for some reason, you might want to do some grading and things like that in DaVinci Resolve, then what you would do is you would select the EXR section down here, and we can do the same. We can literally just render out the same output. Now this is a longer string because I'm using variables to basically create folders, so it's going to be impossible to show this, but it's kind of long-winded and repetitive. But these are the settings that I have on all the EXR outputs. So I'm going to make sure that this, even though it says default scene linear, that is should still default scene linear is actually ACES CG. So if I just press S to go to my root, my color, default scene linear is actually ACES CG. So even though it says scene linear, it is ACES CG. So these EXRs going to make their way onto disk with a little bit of compression, and they're not going to contain AOVs. It's just going to be an EXR, and it's going to be an EXR of the, well, the same comp what we've done for the gray and for the HDRI and for the .mov. So you might not want to do movie files from Nuke. You might want to just put them into DaVinci Resolve and do your movie files after a bit of grading. So that's totally up to you. And you don't normally grade look dev things as well, but there might be other things that you might choose to do. So that goes into here like so, and then I'll just chuck them all in there, and then I'll do the same. So when these get loaded up into another image editor like DaVinci Resolve, you can bring in the list and it'll look easier, or even Nuke. So again, just very last minute, throwing stuff in from one comp that I'm happy with. And if you really wanted to change the look of each comp, even though it's a look dev setup, you can save a new Nuke file for each monster geometry variant and things, and do very custom things if you really want. But again, I'm not really interested in doing that. So as you can see, we've got the gray, and then right next to it we've got the HDRI. So I'm kind of omitting any versioning system at the moment, and that could be quite a headache to look at on disk. But if in DaVinci Resolve or Nuke you wanted to just bring those back in with a read node, you should be able to go to the monsters project and render and assets, and now they're Nuke renders from the monster, and you can choose the EXRs, and they'll be listed like that. So that's kind of how DaVinci Resolve might see them as well. So it's going to be easy, and they'll come in looking exactly how they left as well, because they are actually, where did my viewer go? They're Aces CG, and we're actually working in Aces CG, so there's no change, apart from the grey switch has been activated because of the Python script. Yep, so just to complete it, we could render the occlusion one as well. Render that, click OK. So you get like a collection of movie files, all labeled, self-explanatory. You could start subcategorizing these in other folders, like in here you could have another folder and the versioning system. But just for the look dev thing, I'm not too fussed. So that's all good. That was monster A, and it's that lighting. So I might then want to change this, and let's just change the, let's just make a drastic change. And then it's just a case of hitting render. Now I haven't found a way yet of selecting and rendering all and getting the Python script to work. So if anyone knows, let me know. Or if there's a way of rendering this and triggering that first for that one, like some kind of dependency top thing. I haven't really figured that one out yet. So I tend to just render these. I tend to just render these out as the renders in Houdini are finishing, and then just see what I've got. So this is again a smaller file name because of the HDRI is not as large, but it's the same kind of workflow, monster A, pinko. So you can imagine we could change the name of the geometry variant and the material variant and the light rig. See, that changed to the HDRI automatically, and then we can go and click render again. So it's a bit manual process. So it'd be nice if I could find a way of just doing this. Now, if I took these from Houdini and put them into Copernicus via a top network, I could do some kind of, I could do all this in like a contact sheet. I could make pre-comps of all of these kind of workflows. So you could have the render on a backplate, like the HDRI, then the render on a gray or the render on occlusion, and get labeled and get to their own folders. Then you could bring a contact sheet in. You can do that in Nuke as well. So as you can see now, we've got like another folder, another render. Then we've got the studio version, and the occlusion version isn't really going to look too much different to that because the material is the same. But if there was a different material, you might have different veins and stuff, and that would show up here. So you might want to then choose to bake that, to render that out as well. So you would just make your way through choosing whether you want to output a movie or an EXR. So this might get simplified based on what you need. So that's just a quick outline of what was going off there. Can I click that? Will that re-expand? Excellent. So that was pretty much it. So that's a quick kind of look dev setup that I only tweak certain things every time I've rendered something. I'll bring it in and I'll just save this file, save the comp as, and it goes into the monsters project, assets, monsters, DCC, Nuke, monsters, assets, 01. And this is because it's a global file. It's been dynamically changed by that controller. So if I needed specific things, I'd just name the Nuke file after the name of the asset or something. So again, just up to me really, but It's quite a nice little setup, and I wasn't going to show it, but you know what, why not, eh? Why not? So we can go B, and there's the other monster. That's kind of cool. We don't have any geometry variant, material variants yet, so that'll error if I switch to that. But we can see him in the garden, and obviously the light rig needs to kind of spin around as well as he will spin around, and then the garden will spin around. And if we hit render, you'll get that correct thing on disk, all labeled either EXR or movie, and it will auto switch as well based on this kind of Python script. Will switch between and things like that. So depending on what you want to see, you can kind of create these templates and start to kind of massage the automation as much as you need. So I hope that's been useful, and that's the Nuke comp stuff. So thanks for your time. If you're finding this tutorial useful, why not drop a like and let me know in the comments. And if you're interested in learning more Houdini, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next tutorial.